Our next speaker is Ross Goldberg, and Ross saved me $1,000 this year by deciding not to run for Congress in Arizona. We've been talking about people's histories, but for Ross, it's about his future. Ross plans on being president of the United States. It's a little early to announce his candidacy, but not too early to get him to work for SAGES.
Thank you, Dan, and that's actually going to be $5,000, not $1,000, just so you know. It's really an honor to be here. I know it's going to shift a little bit. We've had some fantastic speakers this morning, and the lineup this afternoon, you can't ask for a better one. So allow me to be your last barrier to lunch and talk a little bit about political action, but I'm actually going to change that to political advocacy. And Dan asked me to talk about kind of my vision for SAGES for advocacy, which I would argue is we haven't really stepped that much in that world. And if we're all about innovation, it's really about expanding and trying different things. So allow me to take us on a little journey of what I envision us. There'll be some surprises, some new ideas. I hope it spawns thought and at least gets you guys interested and engaged. So I have no financial disclosures, but I do need to admit that even for a surgeon, I am not particularly normal. For a lot of reasons, I'm sure some of you would say, but in this particular case, because of my interest in healthcare policy and advocacy, the political world, the legislative world, I actually do enjoy interacting with politicians. I actively seek them out and talk to them compared to most people, because I think it's still important because they have a great impact on what we do for a living. So I do involve myself in that world. Why am I up here talking to you guys about this? Where am I to come from? So I never say that I'm an expert on anything. Trust me, I'm nowhere close to, but I do have experience. Some of my experience, I was the first resident to ever sit on the American College of Surgeons PAC Board of Directors. That's the political action committee about the American College of Surgeons. I have held multiple advocacy positions locally, state, nationally. And since third year medical school, 2001, I've actually lobbied state legislators in Congress for issues for our patients, for our profession. So I've actually been doing this for a while. And again, I currently hold these positions. I'm your chair of the Advocacy and Health Policy Committee for SAGES. I was just announced as the chair of the Health Policy Advisory Council for the college. And I also sit now on their Health Policy Advocacy Group and Legislative Committee. And I actually chair on the SSAT, the Public Policy and Advocacy Committee. So what all that means is really, I just really like to talk a lot. And those who know me are all shaking your head. Yeah, kind of. But I'm kind of a politician, so that's kind of what we do. But what it does is giving me the opportunity to go around and talk and give out my advocacy talks, right? And we've all got our group. I've talked about the science of advocacy. I've talked about the 5-minute legislative consult. You know, you got to have your quotes when you're giving these talks. You know, politicians only, have a 10-second attention span, so you got to give them like good ones. So my talk's always, you're either at the table or at the menu. That's an old Klingon proverb, by the way. But it's the wrong discussion, believe it or not. And I don't know if many of you probably know J.B. Bittner. He's a good friend of mine. And just a few weeks ago at the Clinical Congress, we were talking over some scotch, as one should. And we're talking about why we do these things. And he said to me very honestly, he's a good friend. When I ask him to do something as far as advocacy, he does it because he's my friend. Not because he's really locked into it. He knows I am, but he doesn't really understand or know why he should do it or how he should do it. He just knows that he should do it, but he does it when I ask and doesn't really think about it afterwards. And it really made me sit and think about this for a while, about what are we doing, how are we doing it, and what are we focusing on. So I'd even argue that I am not here right now to talk about advocacy. I am here about hope and selling you the idea of hope and of why your voice is important and why it needs to continue on and why we all need to do this together. Now, obviously, I have a focus on the United States healthcare system, the policy. This still works for all of my international colleagues too, because even though it isn't exactly the same, these concepts transcend borders. So we've been educating the wrong way. We were just talking about intellectual. It's kind of funny. I actually think I have made a bias in myself, is that I assume because I am talking to highly intelligent people that I can raise the bar from the very beginning and lay the groundwork. And I don't mean that as an insult, is that we don't know what we don't know. And I assume there was a base knowledge there that wasn't there. And a lot of people have done that because you start at a higher level. You're talking to a very intelligent audience that has grasp of multiple concepts. So you think you can start at a higher level, and you can't. You have to start with hope. You have to start by accepting the premise that the system can work, even today, watching TV, it still can work, and it can be changed. But you need to show how you can do it, and you have to show that the results actually happen, and you need to engage people on a personal level. If you do not do that, no one cares, right? Based down on how does it affect you, how are you going to be involved, what can you do, I can't really make a difference. I would argue completely against that. I saw that here when I was in Massachusetts as a resident, when physicians came together and stopped a bill at the House that would give pharmacists the ability to prescribe on their own. That actually happened. It took multiple phone calls from individuals, and we got a bill killed in about 30 minutes. Because about 50 physicians called, and they were done. They didn't want to hear anymore from the docs. They realized it was a bad idea. They stopped. It took me a 30-second phone call. So it can be done. But we need to start over on how we approach advocacy. And honestly, this is the perfect organization to do it. All you've heard today is about how innovative we are. We're forward-thinking. So allow me to throw some new concepts out there. And as your new chair of the Advocacy and Health Policy Committee, want to introduce this into SAGES. We've done great stuff with the CPT and RUC. They work really hard on that. But I'd argue in the advocacy world, we really haven't dipped our toe in there, and allow me to kind of dive into there and see if we can get some change going. So we need to focus not on just why it's important to get involved, but I need to get you guys to want to be involved, right? If you're personally invested in something, you have interest in it, you're going to be more engaged. And you have to first realize with the idea that your voice makes a difference. You're not just treating one, you're treating many. But we have not done a good job, and I mean as all of us who are trying to get people to advocate, have sold that concept of how your single voice has ripple effects and how it works for the greater good. Again, messaging has been a problem. You don't know about half the things we do. We're not good at talking about it for as much as we talk. So you start getting those large blasts, right? I'm sure you get them from the college. Does anyone know what the usual response rate is to an action alert from the American College of Surgeons? I know Dave knows, you can't say. It's 4%. 4% respond, like open the email and do something. Because you get an email that says, hey, you need to send this email, you need to click this thing and make this phone call. But it's kind of a why, but no one really knows or understands why they're doing it. So it really should be much more personal. I would argue a much more effective way if you got a personal email to you saying, hey, look, I need you and 10 of your friends to call your congressman so that you can convince them to not vote for this bill so that your patients have access to care, whatever the issue is. But you make it more personal. You make it how it affects you and your patients. You're going to be a little more inclined to do it than get a form email just saying, click this button and do it. Most people don't do it. We get enough emails as it is. I've been sitting here not looking at my phone, and there's a couple hundred messages about things that I don't care about right now. So I want to make sure I get people's attention. You also need to realize that you're far more important than you realize. You're like, I'm just one person. What am I going to do? And it's more than just a physician or surgeon, but to the representatives and the senators, you're a constituent. And that is the most powerful thing you have when you go talk to a member of Congress, because you're a voter. You're one of theirs. They need you to vote for them to stay in office. So, and many of you probably don't know this, if you call your member of Congress or your Senate and you tell them you live in their state, live in their district, the staffer's job is not to give you what you want, but to make you happy and have you get off that phone call happy. That is their job. They are told, if you call and say, I am from Congressman X, if I call Congressman Schweikert, who he and I do not get along, but he is my congressman, his staffer will still make sure that I get off that phone call somewhat happy. It's because I am a voting member of his district, and I can influence if he still has a job or not. So it does carry a powerful voice and a powerful message when you call as a constituent. And I need you guys to realize that as you call and get involved, it really does carry significant weight. So I want to talk about a new way to engage our membership to get them involved, and we have a few ideas. The board heard some of it yesterday, and they're going to hear some new ones today. But again, we got to be creative in how we do this, right? We're inundated with so much. There's so much going on. I do actually just thank our president and our Congress because they've given me ample of time to talk about and opportunities to engage people on why you should be interested in healthcare advocacy, because they only keep on bringing it up every 5 minutes, even in the tax bill. So our new way, I want to inspire you, help educate so that you advocate. And that's our new concept behind engaging the membership for SAGES advocacy, if you will. And we're going to start with the new educational paradigm, starting with this lecture. This is different from what I've done in the past. I'm not just talking about advocacy like I talked about. And we're going to continue this into the annual meeting. And I want to thank the board for approving yesterday a new concept. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, about a new postgraduate course that we're going to try on Wednesday at the SAGES meeting this upcoming year. And again, you see this word hope coming up again and again. I really want to hammer home that you can make a significant impact and it doesn't take a lot of time or effort, just have to know where and how to do it. So we have plenty of master's programs. You've seen that the Sages University, a lot of clinically based. Again, I'm thinking for the advocacy world, there really is no advocacy university. There's nowhere where you can go obtain those skills. We tell you to do it, and then we don't really help you do it. I give you a script to read that's not really teaching you how to be an advocate. No one taught me. I just happen to like to talk, and I show up, and I participate, and I'm a pain in the butt. So I get what I want, usually. So that's what I work on, and that's how I do it, and that's how I got involved. I got involved in advocacy because someone offered me a free trip to San Diego when I went to med school in New York, and they said I can go in November. It was to the AMA meeting. So I said, sure, it's a free trip to San Diego, I'll go. I wrote a resolution for the AMA. I caused a whole bunch of chaos there and got hooked right away. But that's because someone provided me an opportunity. No one really showed me, and I've learned over time, if you don't show people how to do it, that random occurrence does not usually occur. And it's gonna take time. One thing is, as surgeons, we are instant gratification creatures. We see a problem, we fix it, we move on. That's not how this works. This takes a lot of time and effort. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Obviously, you can tell I am not a runner, but so I'm walking my way there. But it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of people, but you start with a core group and you build from there. You can't go and get 1,000 people right away. It's never going to happen. So we have to start, again, on the personal level. So for the first time, we're doing a pilot program, actually, and the invites are for the people in this room. You're going to get an email from me, not today, but soon, giving you the opportunity to sign up for this. It's going to be during the postgraduate sessions on Wednesday at the annual meeting. It'll be for a couple hours, and it's a new concept of an interactive advocacy program where we're going to show you and let you try it out. And one of our faculty members actually is someone who's not a member of SAGES. His name is Brian Gabbett. He's a surgeon. He's in Cincinnati. I don't know if any of you know him. He recently came back from Afghanistan. He's in the Air Force. But what's unique about Brian, he and I worked on advocacy stuff before, but before he went to medical school, he was a staffer for his United States Senator Lisa Murkowski. You may have heard her name come up a few times in the healthcare debate from Alaska. So he's actually been on the inside. So he can actually sit there and simulate what it's like to talk to a member of Congress or a staff member, knows exactly what questions they're going to ask you, knows exactly how to get their attention. The example I gave yesterday, and this is a true example in talking to Brian, is that every member of Congress, one of their staff members every day gives them a folder that's filled with newspaper clippings. And not surprisingly, they're politicians, so they're narcissistic, so those clippings are about themselves. And the question is, how many times did their name come up in their local papers in their district? Because they want to know what's being said about it. So if you want to know a sneaky way to get their attention, write a letter to the editor and put their name in it. They'll literally look at it, look at their staffer, go, why is this here? Go fix it. And you think I'm laughing, I swear that actually works. So there are ways you can do it. It doesn't take much time, and it doesn't have to be about medicine. It can be about whatever you want. But I guarantee you're going to get a follow-up because they're going to know why you're writing about the congressman in the paper. So it's things like that. We're going to not have a lecture like I'm doing right now. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to have simulation, and we're going to try this out. So look forward to my email. I hope you come participate. It is an idea, a concept we have not done before. I don't know anyone that's done it before, really. So I really want to see what we can do and how we can grow this. That will follow up with our session that we have at the annual meeting. It literally is called Why Should I Care? Again, talking about these issues, advocacy, regulation, just to give you some more education. So we will give you the tools to do it and then the background behind to do it so you can feel stronger and more empowered to speak. So it really is going to be a comprehensive way to make you into an advocate. You don't have to be the most verbose person on the planet. You actually don't need to know all the data. I guarantee you members of Congress don't know most of the data. It's really about how to tell your story and how to get the message across. So what else I want to do is that I want to get us in the advocacy world. So to first do that, we need a foundation. Right now, this organization doesn't have what I call advocacy pillars. We have a mission statement, we have goals we go for, but as far as where do we take positions on certain issues, we don't have a basis from. Right now, we're kind of responding randomly. And I want to create that core ideals that we're going to build our concepts off of, because we don't know what's coming down the future. We had some great discussions at the board yesterday, and it was an honor to be there as a guest, speaking for the Advocacy Committee, talking about different public health concepts and issues, kind of new areas to talk about, but the problem is, where do we go? Where does the board go from it? There's no core base, so we're going to write those and present them. They will be the basis of our healthcare positions. And they don't have to be fancy and detailed, but you need a core set of principles. Again, look at the American College of Surgeons. Every time they respond to something, they go back to their core pillars, what they stand for, what they focus on, what drives them. We need that in our organization, and that's specific to our organization. We should be responding to these. I don't think we should sit on the sidelines. It's way too important. Everything that gets done impacts us, whether you like it or not. And I would argue that the most important thing that we have to do right now is advocate for our profession and our patients, because otherwise it can be changed. The great example is the head of my state health committee on the House side in Arizona. She's a friend. She's not a physician. She's a friend of the physician. She understands our concerns. But she gets up in front of a room full of docs and says, I could change your job with one vote. It's very true. We talked about how people got involved. One way I got involved is I went to the Gore conference, great conference for the MIS fellows. Any current fellows ever heard of that conference? It doesn't exist anymore. You want to know why? Because when the Sunshine Act came through and open payment system came through, Gore could no longer sponsor that. And that was part of the Affordable Care Act. So a bill went through that completely blew up the way we can network our fellows, because my class, I can tell you, is very close. And we still talk to each other. But that opportunity was taken away as an unintended consequence of this bill. We've been trying to find ways to get it back, but here's a classic example of how it directly affects you on what's going on in the congressional level. So I can warn the board now, plan to see that in April, because you're going to see our proposal for what our initial pillars are going to look like. You heard, we've talked before about social media. We are streaming on Facebook, Twitter, people are tweeting. And where do we use this to our advantage? And we're starting again into that world. Again, people talk about Brian Jacob and the ideas he's come up with. We need to take it a level further for advocacy. That we really could use social media as an educational dispersal tool. That we are putting a proposal together on how we're going to do that. How are we going to use Twitter and Facebook to educate you about what's going on and then drive you to our content? We're going to add and build the content on our website, give you ideas on our policy statements, our positions, how you can get involved, what you need to do. And then build an advocacy team where we use Twitter to guide you there, among other things. I'm sure it would have gotten your attention if you follow Twitter. It would have been nice to get an email that, hey, by the way, or a tweet, I should say, that 2 days ago or 3 days ago now, that in the tax bill, they've now taken in the account of the individual mandate and are going to repeal it. The Senate side did, to try to recoup $300 billion. And that's in the tax plan. So now healthcare reform is appearing back in the tax plan. And that tweet would have been a simple tweet to get your attention. Here's a link, go to our website, this is what you can do. Here's the information to understand why it affects you. It needs to be on the personal level. And of course, we would coordinate with our staff and the other relevant committees within SAGES to ensure that message stays the same and we're being effective. But we need to find new ways to get people engaged. And this is the instant gratification, time with social media, Twitter, and all that, Twitter and tweets. Sometimes you can talk too fast. To get people engaged and involved. Again, I should warn the board that's coming in April as well. So you're going to have lots of stuff from us. We need to enhance our role in the sister organizations. Paresh Shah is our delegate to the AMA. I'm also a delegate to the AMA through the Arizona Medical Association, and that is still seen by the public as the House of Medicine. The policies they put forth are in the press. When they declared gun violence as a public health crisis, when recently the ones we just took on actually this past week in Hawaii, things like the 25 modifier, if any of you know about that, how Anthem was coming out that they want to cut certain codes if you have a 25 modifier attached to your visit, which is a procedure. So if you do a procedure, the E&M code is going to get cut by 50%. And by the way, they're starting that in January. So the AMA is coming against that. They're talking about scope of practice. They're talking about the opioid epidemic. All of this stuff was discussed. We should play a role in that and have a voice. We need to do a better job of supporting our delegates and telling them what our concerns are, writing resolutions, giving that support so that he speaks on our behalf, so that we are heard at that larger level. Because that policy, when that's enacted, they start doing stuff with it. And we can partner with them and provide advocacy for our membership. Not just with the AMA, other organizations. You've heard a few partnerships we've already done. We should be expanding to the advocacy world. The larger collaboration we can get, the stronger voice we have. We have a very good approval rating in this country. People trust their doctors. They don't trust Congress. We should use that to our advantage and help educate the members of Congress on what needs to be done and why, because no one knows better than us. We're on the ground level. And then also, and I'm going to talk about this at the end too, Whether you like it or not, the name of the game is still there's money involved. And the Surgeons PAC is the Political Action Committee for the American College of Surgeons. Most of you are members of the college, so you're part of what's called the class. You can give money to this organization, which all its sole purpose is to support candidates who support our issues. Now, yes, we like to support physicians too. Right now, I think we're at the lowest number of physicians represented in the House and Senate in a long time. We need docs running. More docs are running this year, though, than I think ever before. I think there are 5 or 6 just in Arizona alone. I'm not one of them. But we need people in there to actually know what they're talking about to make these laws. Because once you make a law, you can't really undo it so easily. So you got to make sure the discussion's going the right direction, the input's getting there, so we support people, Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter what party you are, it's an issues-based PAC. Something to think about. One thing that no one knew I was going to throw out there is there's something out there called Campaign School. Now, the American Medical Association's PAC, AMPAC, has a week-long campaign school. The American College of Surgeons and other organizations have a smaller version, which I've been to, which if you have an interest in getting involved in a public office, they show you kind of the ways to do it. And I would propose something to think about. We should look to see, we may have members besides me who are interested in this world, and that we can help build their leadership that way and show how they get involved. It actually, registration was free last time I looked. It would be putting a scholarship together to give just to the hotel and the flight to participate, to start understanding. Because I'll tell you, once you understand how this all works from the inside, you have a better understanding of how you can reach the members of Congress. So even if you don't want to run, knowing what they need to do, how they do it, gives you an advantage. Trust me, I have a much different perspective on it now and understand why they need certain things, or you phrase certain things a certain way, how it gets their attention. So it's a useful tool to have. Again, knowledge is power, right? This is more knowledge. So one funny thing is we joked about last night is that every time I talk to Dan about something, I get like 7 more assignments. Even if I'm saying hello. And at SAGES this past year, Justin Dimmick and I were talking about, again, this advocacy university concept. So I went to talk to Dan about it, and somehow it became, you should write a book on that. And it's a great idea, though, because there is no book on this. There's little guides, little things. So Justin and I started to talk about the Manual of Advocacy and Health Policy. And this would be more than just a guide, be more than just history, really give you a primer and a base to go from on all of these issues. So we're really looking to building that and starting to put that together now, and that would be for our membership. I mean, we have one on coding and reimbursement. We have one on multiple clinical issues. This one is important too, and we don't do a good job of educating ourselves about it, so we're going to try to put this together for our membership and really all of the medical community so they have somewhere to go to when there's a question they want to move forward with an issue. So again, to go back to the timeline, this is just the beginning, right? This is what we're looking for. We're going to get these advocacy pillars together, the new social media strategy. You'll see the educational sessions at SAGES, but that's just the beginning of it. The long term is to build, if you will, an advocacy army, where you don't necessarily need to do everything every day. You've got people like me for that, right, who live and breathe it. But I want you to be engaged. I want you to feel that your voice makes a difference. I want you to be excited about it. I want you to feel that you are making a difference. So we're going to help you do that. I'm going to end with what we've created the new operating rules, or our 10 Commandments of SAGES Advocacy. I know we're closer to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it's not near Passover, but go with me on this, all right? So, and these are the 10 Commandments of how we're going to operate. So first is, thou shalt put the patient first, always. Whenever we're doing this, it's for our patients. And I think it's important to remember that everything we talk about is for our patients. Thou shalt realize that your voice carries significant impact. I think I've talked about how one voice can make a difference. You've heard stories how one voice on the SAGES board changed the entire direction of an issue. So it can have impact. Thou shalt remember that stories win. You're not there to talk about data. You're there to talk about your patients. Clinical stories carry significant impact. I don't go in there and talk about, when we were doing repeals for Medicare reimbursement, things like that, about the numbers. I went and talked about how my patient couldn't get access to care, about how I fought with an insurance company when I was a resident for my 85-year-old female patient who underwent a triple bypass, who lived in a 2-story walk-up in New York by herself, that maybe she should go to rehab instead of home so she wouldn't get wound infections and have these complicated issues down the road. The insurance company said no, because she walked 50 feet and 1 inch. So since she walked over 50 feet, she didn't need to go to a rehab. So they sent her home, And sure enough, she came back a week later with a sternal infection, had to get that debrided, pec flap. And even though we warned them this was going to happen, they still, by their rules, did that. That story carries significant weight, especially if you're talking about someone's constituent. And they will hear that, they will remember that. And that's how you get your message across. Thou shalt not be offended when asked to meet with junior staff. I hate to break it to you, but Washington is run by 24-year-olds. They actually know more about the issue than the member of Congress does. Think about what the member of Congress needs to deal with in their job. They are not experts on everything. They speak every day and prove us right on that issue all the time. But they rely on their staff to provide them information and guidance on how they should vote on issues. So if you're meeting with a staff member, that's not a bad thing. They probably know more about the issue, and you can have a good conversation with them. So don't walk in and be like, oh my God, I'm meeting with an intern. That's okay. That's okay. And you have to realize that because, by the way, if you make that expression on your face, they see that too. And that can always start the meeting wrong. You're there to get a point across, and you want to start on a good note. Thou shalt not only contact your legislator when you need something, right? Because you love it when people do that to you. You haven't heard it for a while, and then they call you, ask you for something. So this is about building relationships. All of these are relationships. In my state, I've been in Arizona a little over 5 years now. And again, while my congressman and I don't get along, I get along with other congressmen in my state. I see them now. We're already past that formal introduction. So I was in D.C. last month, and one of my congressmen took me out to lunch. It was really weird, but he took me out to lunch. Granted, it was at the Democratic Club, and I think he spent $7 on me. But hey, a congressman spent $7 on me. But he and I had a conversation. We were talking about a bunch of other things, including issues, but in a less formal setting because he and I are friends. And I've known him since he was a state legislator. And I know people that are running for Congress right now, and I can call them on their cell phone and talk to them, and that's not going to change if they get elected. It's all about the relationships. Thou shalt encourage your colleagues to participate with you. This is a team sport. You know, my department runs and hides half the time when these advocacy things come out because they know I'm coming for them. And they know I'm going to talk to them, and they know I won't stop until they do it. So they do it partially so they don't have to talk to me anymore, which I'm fine with. May not work for you, but you want to get your colleagues involved. Your voices combined do make a difference. Thou shalt not leverage money or votes when on federal property. And I have seen, especially surgeons, do this. When you walk into someone's office, especially in D.C., don't start with, I pay your salary, so you should do what I want. Yes, I've actually seen that quote, because you can just turn around and leave, because you're done there. Yes, we're taxpayers. Yes, we pay their public servants. They know this. They don't need you to tell them that, and it will not get you anywhere near what you want. You want your patient coming in saying, I pay my insurance company, so you do whatever I want. That go over well with you? So think about how they feel on their end, too. Thou shalt build relationship within your state. It's not just on a federal level. A lot of, obviously, have state directors. You want to know the state people. They're the ones that control everything when the members come back. And even you want to get in your state legislature. You know, I'm involved with our state legislator as well. I mentioned one before. You know, she was very important to us on a scope of practice fight. We did that for our anesthesia colleagues, where our CRNAs try to get independent practice in Arizona. I have the video to show you the fights that we had on the floor at testimony regarding this. But because I have relationships with some of those representatives, I already had talked to them. They knew where I was coming from. They understood, and they were supportive of our position. And we won, by the way, as we should have, because we were talking about scope of practice in our patients, but it can't just stop there. There was the political aspect to it that we had to overcome as well. Thou shalt focus on opportunities of collaboration. I mentioned that before. Together we are stronger, to take an AMA line. But it is true. It's much stronger when I speak for 1,000 people than just for me. It carries significant weight. If I speak for the House of Medicine, I can guarantee you they're listening. So to remember, we are better when we're working together. And finally, thou shalt leave the system better than when we found it. And that's always our goal. Pay it forward, right? That's the last one, I promise. All 10 are up there now. But should be our goal, is that we know there's issues. It's going to take time to fix it. It's going to take a long time to fix it, and there'll be new ones that pop up. But we should really leave it better than we found it. It's our responsibility to do that for our profession and our patients. And before I end up, I'm going to, of course, because as a politician, I always need to talk about money, right? So there are a couple asks I have at the end, and I'm looking at the buttons that I'm wearing on my coat, because I was asked to mention both. The first, the I Love Sages button you heard. The Sages Foundation has nothing political to do. You heard the great things the foundation does. but make sure you give money for that. We need to give money to that organization. But on this side are my Surgeons PAC pins. And it is important to give. It's important to give because we want to build those relationships, like I said. We need people in Congress who understand our issues and are supportive and want to hear what we have to say. I would say before he was the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tom Price, he and I did not agree on many things for political reasons, obviously. But I will say is that since he had a good relationship with the American College of Surgeons from his time in Congress, when he moved to that new position of Secretary of HHS, he would always take their phone call. And he'd call out to them to get their input on things. He may not agree with them or do what they ask, because that's not what this is. It's about relationship. But the American College of Surgeons got to him a lot easier than a lot of the organizations, including the AMA sometimes, because of that relationship. So that's important to realize that it's all about the relationships. If you're thinking you're giving money to your ideal candidate, good luck, you'll never give any money to anyone. Because someone's going to disagree with you on something. You know, collaboration, one other thing for the collaboration is today's enemy is tomorrow's friend and vice versa. I know in today's political climate, it seems to be everyone is your enemy all the time. But if you go back how it used to be, is that just because someone's against you on one topic, they may be on your side the next time. So you don't want to burn any bridges. Because in the end, we all still got to get through this together. So it's all about those relationships. So that's why they give to both sides, not one party, but they give to issues. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions or no?
We have 5 minutes for questions, so Dr. Shaw.
Ross, I actually wrote a few down. First, thank you and congratulations. It's really heartening and encouraging for me to have other voices at the table that are frankly more boisterous and more convincing than mine have been for a long time. I wanted to actually just take the privilege of this to make a couple of points to all of you here, which is, and Ross, you alluded to this, the importance of organized medicine. You know, we've reached a point in our medical society where people really pick a very narrow organization and do it because of clinical interest or because of clinical alignment. But the relevance of organized medicine cannot be understated. And at a time when the American College of Surgeons is diminishing in membership, when the AMA has diminished in membership, we lose our collective voice when we don't have one. And so everyone bemoans it and says, well, I don't want to pay another membership due. I'm already in 3 societies. I don't have time to go to the meetings, and I don't want to pay the dues. I don't want to participate. Well, when you don't participate, Ross's line is exactly right. When you're not at the table, you're on it. And we, as a House of Medicine, have been on the table for far too long because we haven't chosen to participate in organized medicine. I cannot emphasize to all of you enough, you've got to be part of it. You've got to participate in the organizations. You've got to be a member of the AMA. Whether you like all of their policies or not, they are the single largest voice. You've got to be a member of the college, aside from being a member of SAGES. We have to do this if we're going to maintain our influence and our rightful position as the influencers of healthcare policy. I want to talk a little bit more about the collaboration across societies. Now, you know, Ross, because he's so good at this and so passionate about this, is the chair of advocacy for 3 surgical societies. That's great because he's so good, but that's actually a fundamental weakness for us. That means we've only got one guy that is responsible for advocacy across 3 of the largest surgical societies. That's a fundamental problem. There should be 7 people at each of those societies leading those committees, chairing, co-chairing, waiting to co-chair those committees. That's on us. That's only because of a vacuum that's happening. So we need to be able to align what we do at SAGES, at SSAT, at ACS, at the AMA, across our houses of medicine and our houses of surgery. And the last thing I want to bring up is, I'll plug the PAC again. You've got to donate to your PACs. And I would say PACs are not just the ACS PAC, your local state medical societies. Your state legislatures impact more of what you do on a day-to-day level than anything that happens at the federal level. State laws dictate that, and your state PACs are orders of magnitude more influential than the federal PACs. And Ross can speak to this, but this has just been true at every level. And I can tell you in New York, this is absolutely true. Much of the legislation that gets passed happens at that level. The last thing I want to talk about, though, is advocacy, and this is absolutely great at a political level, is really important. But I want to call out Brian Duncan because during his presidential year, we took SAGE's advocacy to another level as well, which is advocacy for physician-related interests and patient-related interests, specifically around access to care. And what I mean by that at a practical level is payer-level advocacy. We develop positions. We put out position papers. We support things. We write CPT codes. We go to RUC and get valuations for those codes. And in full disclosure, I was your CPT and RUC representative for almost a decade. And most of the codes that you use now, lap hernia, gastric bypass, paraesophageal hernia, we as a society wrote those codes. We got them funded at RUC. We got Medicare to cover them. And then we dropped the ball because we didn't take it to the next level with the payers. We're doing that now. We're doing that more aggressively now, but we need a more formal structure with which to do it. We need those pillars on the payer advocacy side, and we need all of you to engage on that. At the end of the day, having a code doesn't mean anything if you're not getting paid for it. Having a code doesn't mean anything if your insurer decides not to include it in their panel. And that's up to us to do, and it requires that engagement. Surgeons in particular and physicians in general have been historically negligent because they're so busy in what they do day to day. We are all overworked. We are all overtasked. We all see more patients than we should. We all work later than we should. And we don't keep a good work-life balance, Jeff. I wish I was better at it. I'm probably a worse poster child than Brian is for it. But, yeah, right. But this is relevant to us. So advocacy is more than just legislation. Advocacy is what happens at our hospital, what happens in our health system. Advocacy is what happens with our payers, what happens with our insurers, and what happens at CMS and government from a regulatory perspective. And all of it is topped off by what happens legislatively. So thank you.
Dimitri.
Hi, Dimitri Napomenoshy from Leahy. Ross, I share your interest in advocacy. I am a runner, so that's different, but I am a pain in the ass, so that's similar. I mean, some challenges that I've faced, and maybe you could address these, is that, one, I don't know when the issues come up. I don't know what the issues are. I have tried communicating with the legislators, and I have some relationships, but it's ad hoc, and I feel like I'm late to every time I hear about it. It's more from the news or the newspaper when it's already happened and been voted on before I've had a chance to actually talk to them about it. And two, I don't know what the House of Surgery wants me to say, and I don't feel well prepared to represent them, and I feel anxiety when I walk into their office and I meet with them and they ask me my opinion on things. I say, well, this is my opinion. I'm not sure it's everybody's opinion or even the majority opinion, and is it a society opinion? Is it an individual opinion? And so I've struggled with those issues, and look forward to any kind of advice or input you may have. Thank you for doing this.
Those are, I think that hits a key point. It's on us is that we haven't done a good job educating and providing you those materials, which we're hopefully going to change, and give you resources to go so you know what to talk about and what to focus on. As far as talking with the legislators and ad hoc, and this is where in one of my talks, and I've published on this, is something called the 5-minute legislative consult. And I do say this a lot because it's a way that you can get involved very easily, and it literally takes 5 minutes out of the week. If any of you have ever been on the phone ever, that's all you need to do. And I would say make a list of your state and your federal representatives and senators, and once a week call one of their offices to talk about whatever you want. What happens when you call, every time you call and you identify yourself as who you are, what do you do, that you live in the district or you work in the district, they write that down. They keep track of who's calling about what and what they're talking about. The more frequently you call someone, and you rotate it up, right? So I'm going to call my first state rep this week. the next one next week, my senator the week after that, and then move on to Congress. And it's a rotating cycle. So that as you keep on calling, you move from just a vote to an engaged constituent. So that, and they write down, oh, it's Dr. Goldberg, he's a surgeon. Now a medical issue's come up. They don't know anything about that. Hey, I've got someone who calls me all the time. Let me call Dr. Goldberg, see what he has to say. I guarantee you that works. When I was here in Massachusetts during my research time, I did a state day. I walked around. I was during my residency at the State House, and they were all excited a doctor was there. I was like, I'm a resident. They're like, yeah, you're a doctor. And they started asking me questions about bills. Like, I got asked about, my favorite one is asked about, someone wanted to lobby about not having to dissect frogs in high school. And what did I think about that? And my response is, as a surgeon, I'll dissect whatever you want, so I'll take more of them any day of the week. But again, because I was a physician and I was physically there talking to them, they wanted to engage. So you do that, and you don't have to talk to the member. But again, you call, and it's a 5-minute conversation. Talk about the environment. Talk about whatever you want to talk about. It doesn't have to be medicine, but by doing that, you build that relationship. As far as the content size and making you guys aware, we're working on that. Going to hopefully do a better job in the future.
So we have 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to break for lunch because we're going to be starting promptly at 12:30. So go ahead.
Hi, Ray Price from Salt Lake City, co-chair of the Global Affairs Committee. We spent many years working towards a resolution of the United Nations just to recognize surgery as part of universal health care that was finally passed 2 years ago and voted unanimously by 194 nations around the world. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on our global affairs on an international level, not just at our national level here. What is the role of SAGES in trying to look towards a broader scope of advocacy at this international component?
I think it's an area that hasn't been explored that should be. I think, again, we are an international organization. We're not just for United States surgeons. So I think it's our responsibility, including the Advocacy Health Policy Committee, to explore those avenues and represent all surgeons everywhere. Again, things are different in other countries, but the core principles stay the same in my belief, and that we should be speaking for everyone. So I think our role is to get right in the middle of it and use our voice and help educate our members on how to do it and those who make the decisions on what needs to happen. I think it's an important role that we should play, not just in the United States. 100% agree.
Last question.
Hi, Andrew Lederman from here in Massachusetts. That was a great summary of how to reach your legislator, your representative, but I find often the people I want to reach are not the people who represent me directly. I tend to agree with them. How do you get in front of people from other states or representatives who don't see you as their constituent?
It's always going to be tricky because the constituent will always win in those eyes of those representatives in Congress and senators, but they will meet with anyone. And I didn't get into this into great detail, and again, I will plug our session on Wednesday afternoon at SAGES, that we're actually going to talk about that a little bit because it all works together. So when a lobbyist, say the ACS lobbyist, goes to talk about with one of these members about an issue, they're just a lobbyist. Now, if you add that before that happened, 10 to 15 surgeons called about that same issue, you've now helped each other out. You've validated the issue because people are calling, but you've also validated that lobbyist. So they're coming in with a much stronger voice than before, because I've lobbied other senators and congressmen outside of my state, right? I don't just go to Arizona. I'm all over the place. So actually, you got to rely on your colleagues to do it. This is where it's the team sport. It's a combination of the local people calling to validate what you're going to come talk about and vice versa, and then that lobbyist is validating what you've been talking about. It really isn't just one thing. It's a multitude of things happening to make it effective. So that's why you really need other people to get involved. It's much more powerful that way, and that way we can get our issues across and you have a greater effect. Some people are never going to change their mind. It's just unfortunately the way it is. Again, while my House Health Representative chair in Arizona is great, the Senate one is a nightmare, and I can't wait for her to term out, and there's nothing ever going to happen to change her mind because she believes that she should walk into a doctor's office and they never write anything down because, God forbid, it gets stolen. And she actually does believe that. So I deal with it the best I can. There's some people you're never going to reach, but your goal is to also get the majority to see your side, not everyone.
So again, from the SAGES strategic plan, what we're going to have is the Advocacy Champions program. Ross is going to lead with experts from our organization outside. It will be limited to 50 people. So while there's 300 folks here, only 50 will be able to do this. So those of you who have your business cards, by all means talk to Ross, plug it, and I'm sure he'll have an application process as well. But this should be a really exciting thing for someone interested in this field and charged and excited about your topic. Ross, thank you. I'd like to thank all the speakers from this morning. And remind you, we're going to be starting very promptly at 12:30. Our first speaker in the afternoon is Stu Altman. He's the guy who coined the word DRG.